Welcome to Tech Blueprint, a window that lets you know the latest technology news in the world. The Trump administration imposed high tariffs on Chinese goods on the grounds of reciprocal tariffs. China then announced countermeasures, not only imposing reciprocal tariffs on American goods, but also taking strict control of the export of rare earth raw materials. Faced with China's rare earth control and its strategic declaration of fighting to the end, the United States quickly compromised on the tariff issue. The two sides held the first round of negotiations in Switzerland, and after the negotiations were completed, the United States restored tariffs to the level before the implementation of reciprocal tariffs. At the same time, U.S. President Trump has repeatedly called on China to relax rare earth controls and plans to hold a new round of negotiations with China on rare earth issues in London. But judging from the current situation, the two sides did not reach an agreement on the relevant issues at the time, and China's subsequent statement also proved this. Our export approval work for overseas rare earths is accelerating, but it is hard to say to what extent. The United States dual-use military and civilian products, including the F-35 fighter, cannot do without China's supply of rare earth raw materials. China's cutoff of the supply of rare earth raw materials is even more serious and extensive than the cutoff of our chip industry. Seeing that we have not given in on the rare earth issue, after the failure of the Sino-US rare earth negotiations, the United States changed its plan to cancel the exemption for some foreign companies to China, which will further aggravate the crisis we face in the chip field. According to overseas media reports, Jeffrey Kessler, head of the Export Control Department of the U.S. Department of Commerce, has notified major semiconductor manufacturers including TSMC, Samsung Electronics, and SK Hynix that he will cancel the full exemption that currently allows these companies to ship U.S. chip manufacturing equipment to Chinese factories. In other words, chip foundry companies including Samsung, SK Hynix in South Korea, and TSMC in China must first obtain export licenses from the U.S. Department of Commerce if they want to purchase more U.S. equipment in their factories in China in the future. This will further increase the operating costs of several companies in China, and at the same time, it will also have a certain negative impact on the development of the domestic chip industry. At present, the channels for Chinese companies to purchase equipment from overseas semiconductor equipment manufacturers have been blocked by the United States. The other party deliberately cut off the trade of high-end semiconductor equipment to China by putting pressure on Japan, the Netherlands, and other countries. However, this time the other party took the initiative to cancel the exemption of TSMC, Samsung, and SK Hynix in China, which is a rare turning point for the development of the domestic chip industry. First of all, the development of the domestic chip foundry industry was previously severely restricted by the restrictions of foreign companies. From equipment to chip foundry business, we need to compete with foreign companies in price and quality. TSMC will transfer its own technology to the domestic market, which will easily achieve a dimensionality reduction attack on domestic chip foundry companies. The cancellation of the chip equipment exemption in the United States will not only help the development of the domestic chip industry, but also be a rare opportunity for the commercialization of domestic equipment. After all, most chip equipment except high-end lithography machines are already capable of domestic manufacturing in China. The United States cuts off the external purchase channels of Samsung and TSMC, but it clears the obstacles for the other party to equip domestic equipment. As domestic equipment enters the production lines of foreign companies, it will bring a lot of impetus to the iteration and research and development of domestic equipment. Secondly, companies such as Samsung and SK Hynix have huge investments in China. Once the exemption is cancelled, they are faced with a dilemma. Continuing to produce in China means taking on the risk of US sanctions. Withdrawing from the Chinese market means giving up huge investments and mature industrial chains. In this case, they are likely to choose technology transfer or joint ventures to keep some core technologies in China. More importantly, market gaps are opportunities. When foreign chip companies are unable to supply normally due to political factors, domestic chip companies have more market space and trial and error opportunities. Companies such as Yangtze Memory Technologies and Changshan Memory Technologies have grown rapidly in this environment. Looking through history books, every time the competition between major powers escalates, the technology field must be reshuffled. At the end of the 19th century, Germany challenged British hegemony with the chemical industry. The United States surpassed Europe with electrification in the early 20th century, and the Soviet Union's aerospace technology during the Cold War kept the United States awake at night. Now it's the turn of the US-China technology showdown. However, this game is more complicated. It is no longer a simple technology competition, but a comprehensive competition in supply chain, standard setting, and talent flow. Rare earths versus chips are just a fragment of this drama. Using a stubborn mind to block both ends is the most appropriate way to describe the current US-China technology game. Both sides are working hard on the other's weak point, and both want to gain the upper hand through asymmetric attacks. But historical experience tells us that the real winners are often not those who are good at choking the neck, but those who can continue to innovate and remain open. The breakdown of rare earth negotiations and the cancellation of chip exemptions seem to be tense, but in fact they may all be accumulating chips for the next round of negotiations. After all, in today's globalized world, complete technological decoupling is not good for anyone. What do you think about this? Welcome to leave a message and discuss.